Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping in to a porter from Equilibrium Brewing. This specific porter is called Möbius. It's 7% ABV, Equilibrium based in Middletown, New York. So before we even get into the beer, and I'm going to have to pull my phone because it's a lot, but in case you're wondering about the name, most people would say this Möbius, but you'll see the two dots over the O. That's an umlaut. That's in German, so it makes almost a cross between a glottal stopped O and an sound. So it's Möbius, Möbius. And it's not Möbius. Though anglicized, it probably would be pronounced that way. But the emblem on this label art, it's probably a little hard to see, is a representation of what that actually is. So I'm going to read this. This is beyond out of my realm of expertise. What is a Möbius? It is a surface with only one side when embedded in three-dimensional Euclidean space and only having one boundary curve. The Möbius strip is the simplest non-orientable surface, and it can be realized as a ruled surface. It was discovered independently by two co-German mathematicians, Johann Benedict Listing and August Ferdinand Möbius, back in 1858. So that is what it is. That's the shape. It's like a sealed flat band that kind of rolls in and out of itself and forms to like a circle. You've definitely seen one. It's a little hard to tell from here, but nonetheless, that's what it means. So why Equilibrium chose this as the name for their porter, I do not know, but I've had a lot of their beers over the years, a lot of their IPAs, and I might have had this at one point in the past, but I know I've never done a review on it, and it's been years. So with a completely fresh set of eyes, we're going to get this one cracked. Give this a whirl, get this poured right in our nice porter glass here. Yep, nice and dark. Give this a chance to form a head. Most porters tend to be pretty active in terms of carbonation, and they will often break down a head before it even has a chance. But this one seems to be nice, tight carbonation. Now, it is essentially pitch black. So it's a little hard to see, but I can see the effervescence coming up, clinging from the side of the glass is super fine, super tiny champagne-like bubbles. So I presume that's why this created this really nice, rich, creamy head here. Looks very much like you would see on a stout pulled at a tap. So it looks great. Let's give it a sniff. Oh yeah. Yeah, that smells like a classic porter. Really a lot of rich roast in this one. So it's got this slight kind of dark fruity accent bit to it, which is common in the aroma on a porter, but it's got a lot of roast. This one has a lot more roast intensity than the average aroma on a porter. So I'm not really sure what to expect until I get in here, but 7%, that's a pretty high ABV on a standard porter. Indeed, that's for the style getting up high enough, they might even be able to start encroaching and calling it an imperial. Maybe that would be on the low end for most people's, kind of general definition, but there is no hard and fast rule. It's definitely higher ABV than your average porter, to be certain, and it smells really, really nice. So there's a nice bit of roast to it, and even some caramelly and very strong chocolatey undercurrents coming off of it, all while still smelling like a classic porter. Porters do have a distinctly different smell to their stout porter counterparts, so this smells quite nice. It looks great. That head is holding true, nice and creamy. Let's just jump right in and see what this one's about. Oh, that's really nice. Oh, that's a very well done porter. Very well done indeed. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot that happens with this flavor profile as it opens up over time. It's equally as complex as the aroma profile, and they do share a lot of similarities. So before we get into the flavor, let's talk about the texture. The body on this, it's 7%, but this actually maybe on the border between medium light and medium. It doesn't feel like a heavy beer. 7%, it's not super heavy, but it doesn't feel it at all. In terms of texture, it does have a pretty resistant mouthfeel. It feels like you would expect a 7% beer to have in terms of resistance, and this one, when you agitate around the palate, does get extremely creamy. Very, very creamy, very silky. It's super smooth. It gets this nice sensation of even greater thickness. So the mouthfeel is quite a bit more lush compared to the weight of the body. It doesn't feel heavy, but texturally, very, very nice, very thick, very silky. In terms of the flavor profile, so kind of the way that it opens and develops is almost the same, just with varying degrees of intensity as what you actually get in the aroma profile. So there's the slight sweetness you get up front, which really, that's kind of the side of a porter that normally will smell and taste a bit like kind of rich fruit. I can't say that there's any particular fruit that I think it reminds me of, but it's got this kind of fruity quality to it. And then that immediately opens up to these kind of caramelly undertones. And then come about the 3-4 second mark, the roasty edge of the malt really starts to open up, and it continues to increase in intensity, and it gets super rich, super roasty, even taking on a little char-like qualities. You don't often get into porter. You do in a stout relatively regularly, but not in a porter. And the level of intensity that this roast takes on is really quite tremendous. I didn't expect it, but it came out really, really nice, really, really strong. And I am pleased to say this is one of those porters that's been executed absolutely brilliantly. Sometimes they take on these kind of funky off tones. I don't know if that's in part to specific ingredients some brewers use or just something in the process that they do. But this one doesn't taste like that at all. It tastes really nice. It tastes properly like porter with maybe a bit more impetus on the roasty edge and a bit more forward presence to that than you would normally find in a standard porter. It's absolutely delicious. So I'm going to jump back here for a second sip. We're going to let everything re-intensify, see if I missed anything, then we're going to talk about this finish. But this is a very impressive porter indeed. Yeah, it's slight suggestion of sweetness, little caramelly undertones. There's actually a nice bit of kind of cereal and grain-like qualities that comes right behind that as well. A lot of caramel. Now it's starting to open in this rich, rich, rich roast. There's elements of it that do put me in mind of coffee without it tasting like coffee per se. It's that very roasty edge to the malt that takes on that quality like a very roasted edge to a coffee bean. That's where it's going. Oh, a lot of chocolatey undercurrents there. Yeah, everything is just kind of amped up. It's more pronounced on the second sip as it coats the palate again. Very, very nice. A little bit of bitters. It's not over the top, but there are some bitters owing to this nice roasty edge to this malt bill. Absolutely delicious, and kind of just starts to slowly dissipate and fade into the background. So the finish on this one, for a porter, it's long. It's definitely longer than average, to be certain. This is not barrel aged, it's just a standard porter. So bearing that in mind, it's definitely longer than you would expect. It's not as long as some, but this is just a standard basic porter, no additives, no barrel of any kind. It's just a porter. And what's really driving it out on this one is the depth of that roast. It does still linger on the back of the palate. There's this nice roasty and slightly earthy bitter-like quality that floats on the back of the palate. Very, very, very nice. Wet all the way to the end, and it's got a subtle decline until it finally just disappears. Absolutely delicious. I love a good porter. This is an exceptional porter. I absolutely love it. I'm going to take my time sip on this one, count my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Equilibrium Brewing's Möbius, A classic porter clocking in at 7% ABV. Equilibrium is based in Middletown, New York. So starting with the aroma on this beer was absolutely fantastic. It smelled very much like a classic porter. It was significantly more pronounced than your average porter's aroma. I was actually really impressed by that because it formed such a lush, thick, creamy head, but the aroma had really good pungency, so it really did come out of the glass. I think that head did its job and really helped pronounce that aroma out. Had that slight kind of fruity sweetness on the front, tons of caramel, and really, really rich roast you could smell, well above average. The aroma does get a 9 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely loved it. This was one of those textbook, perfectly executed porters for my money. No funky overtones, just classic porter in a bigger than average porter kind of front here with that 7% ABV. I loved it. The taste gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body on this one was really just on the border between medium light. It was definitely not quite as robust as I would expect on a 7% ABV. Overall, it was really just hovering in the low end of average range. Body gets a 4 out of 10. In all the remaining categories, it did get a perfect 10 out of 10. That's mouthfeel, finish, head and retention. It was extremely impressive. The appearance, balance, feeling in the intangible, my subjective thoughts category, and example of the style, which does bring the total score on Equilibrium's Möbius to a 93 out of 100. This is a top tier porter. Porter was the style that started my lifelong love of the craft beer scene in the first place. So every time I have a classic well-done porter, it always takes me back to that very first time I had a truly special beer. And I think I'm probably going to carry that with me to the rest of my days. And this was just as equally impressive as the very first fantastic porter that I ever had. I loved it. This is a no-nonsense, no frills, back to basics, just classic, perfectly executed porter. I recommend this to any porter fan. Absolutely worth your time. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.